Do you have any advice or experience with athletes that are in the middle of a task? So let's say it's even not physical. Let's say it's a work task, right? Or they have to prepare for a presentation or test or whatever. Do you have any experience with doing these interventions like in the middle of the activity? Or for example, if you were at rugby practice and you started feeling like not, mentally well or whatever it is, you started to feel some mental fatigue and you have like a break or even halftime. Is there anything that you would suggest, or is there any intervention cases that you guys have seen them do it right in the middle of the task, and then it kind of helped to buffer preventing loss of performance or more mental fatigue?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it comes down to convenience quite a lot of the time as well, and what's viable in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
We see a lot of people use it pre-game. So talking to a footballer recently, felt terrible, but had a big game coming out, needed to perform, just wasn't feeling great and not in the right mindset either. And took one of our short sessions, he's taking into 2 or so minutes, was sitting in the changing room before a game and was just able to sort of completely switch around his mindset. And he said he had one of the best games of his life. It's a really fascinating stuff there. In terms of in the middle of a session, there's some really interesting stuff. Like if there's time between breaks, we were talking to some squash players recently who, in the middle of tournaments, potentially use it then to sort of reset between different games and sort of getting a good mindset. You've had a lot of, might have had a frustrating game. You might have be feeling under a lot of fatigue, all these different factors that you can just take 2 minutes if you can to reset, and ultimately has a much bigger effect on the rest of your game, rest of your competition, and ultimately your performance.
No, that's really fascinating. And there's, a lot more awareness, I think, coming out about this type of realm and how we got to make sure that our mental state is supporting everything that we need, right? Can you briefly talk about how your app kind of pulls in all of the information from, fitness trackers, Oura Ring, Apple iWatch, and kind of how that's driving some of the recommendations with the mental exercises? What is, in a nutshell, kind of that cohesive piece, I guess, of the puzzle to see what's happening physiologically, and then how that's kind of adjusting some of the interventions for the app and their exercises?
Are you speaking in sort of terms of on-the-spot recovery protocols or more long-term training protocols?
I think both, because there is, everyone knows intellectually there's definitely a tie, right? But how do those things kind of, I guess, how do you explain that or envision that those two pieces working with the mental exercises that your app provides?
Yeah. So really interesting. That's sort of the crux of why we introduce a monitoring protocol is that we need to understand where you're at to understand what's right for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can adapt the situation around that. So we're collecting HRV, we're collecting resting heart rate each morning. We get a nice picture of where you're at physically. We also get a really nice picture of where you're at cognitively. So we can understand when is the right time for you to take a cognitive task or neurotraining task and ultimately balance that over time. It's similar, to training your body. You ideally want to take on load when you're in a good, well-recovered state. Mm-hmm. So similar concept with cognitive training. We want to take on neurotraining when we're in a good cognitive state.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at that, and that's when we recommend it. We also tie it back quite nicely to your workout too. So once you finish a Strava workout, if you've connected Strava, you're in a good state to take it on, we'll connect that up to either our post-workout recovery system or our post-workout neurotraining system. Mm-hmm. So we take a look at your workout and also your sort of readiness for the day, and understand whether it's right to take on some post-workout neurotraining to add on some mental load to your session, or whether it's good to take on some mindset recovery and perhaps, really focus on reducing the mental and physical fatigue you built up. So different aspects there. We can also, we've got some really interesting technology that we'll be releasing later this year around combining neurotraining with your physical training.
Okay.
So we can literally track both those aspects at once and get some really fascinating insights and data from that. So, we're tracking your power output, we're tracking your heart rate whilst you're on the bike, but also whilst you're doing neurotraining at the same time. And ultimately we're challenging both systems at once cognitive and physical systems. And we also got data from the cognitive task as well. So we can really tie together your performance in that with your performance in the physical side of things. We built a really interesting proprietary metric called perception gap. And that's the gap between your expected RPE based on performance metrics like average power, heart rate, load, different aspects like that, which really allow us to judge your expected RPE. And then we combine that with your actual RPE. And the gap between the two is fascinating because it's kind of like, the gap in perception between how hard you worked and you felt like you worked and how hard you actually worked. And that gives us a really nice measure of mental resilience. So we're very excited to bring that out later this year.